to Psalm 28. And we're going to be sharing together about what I hope will be a very encouraging passage to you, as has been to me, and I trust it'll be to you as well. I'm very grateful for you as a church and for you as a people. You have responded in a great way in many ways to the needs of the church and the opportunities we have. And I just want you to know that I'm excited about our future, excited about what God is doing in our midst. But I've enjoyed going through My Shepherd. I've enjoyed preparing and preaching, and I hope you have enjoyed studying these precious passages. Hard to believe, but next Sunday we start Christmas. And I ask you to make a few moments after church next Sunday to hang around with us. Because there'll be decorating going on, getting ready for Christmas, and so we'll decorate together like we did last year. And so I hope all of you will plan on hanging around and hanging an ornament on a tree, or trying to, be in the way, whatever. But no, I hope many of you will do that and be very helpful. Let's look together in God's Word. We've been in My Shepherd. Remember, we saw the Good Shepherd dying for the sheep. We saw the great shepherd living for the sheep. We saw the glorious shepherd coming back for the sheep. And now we see the gracious shepherd who will be caring for the sheep. And that's where we'll be today. Remember, two questions I always ask you when we read a passage. What did I learn about God? What did I learn about people? And even though we won't have a small group this week, I hope you will answer those questions and write them down, because they'll help you as you investigate the passage. He says in verse 1, "To you, O Lord, I called, my rock. Be not deaf to me, lest, if you be silent to me, I become like those who go down to the pit. Hear the voice of my pleas for mercy, when I cry to you for help, when I lift up my hands toward your most holy sanctuary. Do not drag me off with the wicked, with the workers of evil, who speak peace with their neighbors while evil is in their hearts. Give to them according to their work and according to the evil of their deeds. Give to them according to the work of their hands. Render them their due reward. Because they do not regard the works of the Lord or the work of his hands. He will tear them down and build them up no more. Blessed be the Lord. For he has heard the voice of my pleas for mercy. The Lord is my strength and my shield. In him my heart trusts, and I am helped. My heart exults, and with my song I give thanks to him. The Lord is the strength of his people. He is the saving refuge of his anointed. Oh, save your people and bless your heritage. Be their shepherd and carry them forever. My shepherd, the gracious shepherd. When I read this passage, I'm reminded of two things that the psalmist has set out to do. One is to distinguish the difference between the wicked and those who follow the good shepherd. Second of all, understanding that in the midst of distress, in the midst of problems, in the midst of difficulty, God would preserve them. Hear me today, hear me well. Every one of us will go through distress. Every one of us will go through times of despair. I want you to grab your mind around that for a moment, because I grew up in a church life that said, hey, if you follow Jesus, all your problems are solved. Well, that's not what the psalmist said at all. He actually says there's issues in spiritual journey. See, you don't get to go to heaven. I think one of the ways we really messed that up is when we started singing Canaan land like it's heaven. You all remember that? Everybody singing about Canaan land. They're going to heaven. They didn't read their Bible. Did you know when Joshua got to Canaan land, he had to fight at Jericho? He had to fight at Ai. I've just been reading through Joshua again, and I've been amazed. Man, they're fighting all the time. Listen, that's not heaven. We're not going to fight when we get to heaven. Because you see, there's no more death or sorrow or sickness there. I really believe that Egypt is the world, and the Jordan, crossing of the Jordan, is a picture of conversion. And yeah, we're in a new life, but there are battles. There will be distress, and you and I need the shepherd. Hard to believe 2024 is coming to an end. It'll be over soon. And we'll roll into a new year, right? And guess what? New year will have stress just like the old year had. It's called life. You see, he prayed the Lord would save and the shepherd would take care of his people. The Lord is addressed in verses 1 through 4. And notice how he talks to him, but then he moves to the third person in verses 5 through 8, and then he returns back to talk to Yahweh in verse 9. The psalmist is a companion. This psalm is a companion to Psalm 26. When you read Psalm 26, you ought to read Psalm 28. They go hand in hand. See, Psalm 23 to Psalm 28 are linked together, and it's all around the time that Absalom is rebelling against his father. You see, the psalmist gives us insight into the heart of the writer. David knows, my son has pursued me. My son is after me. I could die at any moment, but here's what I know. I have a shepherd who has grace, and a shepherd who cares, and a shepherd who is concerned. You see, that was hard to concept in the Old Testament. Because what did they live by? The law. And the law was a do and don't system given by God for the very purpose to teach them about righteousness. But you and I understand a lot more about grace. We understand a lot about grace. Grace is a wonderful thing when it's used to produce and to help and to encourage. And our shepherd is caring for us, and he provides grace for us. Now, there are three things I want you to get in this passage. First of all, in verse 1, he hears us. The psalmist said, hear the voice of my pleas for mercy. When I cried to you for help, verse 2, when I lifted up my hands toward your most holy sanctuary. Catch that. Hear the voice of the pleas for mercy. Now let's go to verse 1. In verse 1, we see the light and life in tough times. To you, O Lord, I call, my rock. Did you catch what he said? Be not deaf to me, lest if you be silent to me, I become like those who go down to the pit. My rock, he says in verse 1, is an important thing. It does not mean to us just a title. He is calling God his refuge. He says, oh Lord, I call. You are my refuge. You are my hope. If you don't hear me, then I'm as good as dead, is what it really means. Anybody ever prayed that way? God, if you don't move, God, if you don't do something, God, I got to have you. You've got to hear me, because when you hear me, I cannot afford for you not to speak to me. Listen, folks, in times of struggle, it's life or death. In times of battle, it is the pit, which is the underworld, death. The psalmist is afraid that God will go silent. Anybody understand what silence means? There's no help, right? Anybody ever had a spouse who goes silent? You see, as long as Phyllis is complaining, I'm okay. It's when she goes silent. Houston, we have a problem. Am I right? And we used to ride down the road, and when she'd get silent, she'd look out the window. And I can't tell you what I said to her. But I looked over there one day, and I saw those shoulders shaking. I knew the fight was over. She was laughing. I still make you laugh, don't I? Sometimes. Depends on what I've done, right? More what I said. You see, my supplication is to God to have mercy on me. Is it important for you to know God hears you? That's a question. Can I get an answer? Is it important to you as an individual to know that God hears you? Yes. How important is it? It's life or death. God, don't go deaf to me. He says, when I lift up my hands toward your most holy sanctuary, he is waiting for God to move. Hear me. You and I have got to quit being the strategists. Get in the plan. We know how to do this and we know how to do that. Well, I'm going to tell you, we better do this or this is going to happen. Now, listen, what we need to do is wait on God to hear us. And wait on God to what? Move. I was reading the story of Jericho again, and I had to laugh. You could tell they weren't Baptists, because somebody would have called a business meeting and said, this is the dumbest idea we've ever had. This will not work. And they'd have had a great debate, right? And everybody that told us how it wasn't going to work and how bad it was and how dumb it was. Let me tell you something, folks. I believe God has taken his hand off many a church and many a life because we refuse to wait for God to move because we decided we're going to do it. You praise with your hands. By the way, did you know you don't praise with your hands like this in the Old Testament? You praise like this. Servanthood. The hands of offering your servant to God. Today we look to the throne where our King sits at the right hand of God and he makes intercession for us. And there he has us in his hand. I've recently gone through a battle that I've told no one about except the Lord. And in that time of walking with God in the wee hours of the morning, by the way, I love having a phone next to me because at 2 o'clock in the morning I can roll over and open that phone to that Bible app and begin to read. And as I read the scriptures, I'm reminded, God, you hear me. And I'm drawn to the fact that if I ask anything according to his will, he heareth us. And if we know that he heareth us, we have the petitions that we have desired of him. I'm glad he hears us, aren't you? But then he moves on to verse 8, and we'll get back to verse 3. But in verse 8, he helps us. Notice what he said in verse 8. The Lord is the strength of his people. He is the saving refuge of his anointed. He helps us. Anybody ever needed help?
Yes.
Anybody ever said, hey, I need a little help here, right?
Always.
You see, in verse 3, he said, do not drag me off from with the wicked. Lord, you're going to drag the wicked off with the workers of evil. You're going to take care of them. Please don't let me go with them. Who speaks peace with their neighbor while evil is in their heart. Let me translate that one for you real quick. You ready? You ever had somebody say, you know I love you, and you know they've been talking bad about you? That's what that verse means. They talk about peace and love, but hate is in their hearts. When I read that passage, I can't help but think about a guy who sent a really nasty email about me 20 years ago or so. And he hit the wrong button, and it went to all my friends instead of the person he thought he had sent it to. Being a kind gentleman that I am, when I got it, I called him. And I asked him if we could meet. And he, oh, yeah, let's meet. And so we meet. I have another witness with me. We're sitting at my table in my office there in Kentucky. I'll never forget this. And I said, hey, have you ever seen anything bad about me in print? Oh, no, Tim, I would never do that. I said, well, let me read something to you. So I started reading him his email. And at one point, I hear him screaming, and I don't look up. He's begging me to stop, and I keep reading. And when I look, he's in the floor on his knees begging me to stop. You see, that's a guy who speaks love and peace, but has what? Hate. Let me tell you something. Love is not what you say, it's what you do. You can holler, I love you all day long, but it's what you do that makes the difference. And there are a lot of people who live in a world of hate. They live in a world of deception. Their hearts are wicked. And that's what he says. Listen, our world will tell us, hey, let's join us. We all agree. But I'm going to tell you something, folks. There is a far difference. Hear what I'm about to say. Than saving the moral fiber of a nation and the spiritual awakening that this world really needs. Verse 4. He says they're going to punish with crime. Notice what he says. Give to them according to their work. If they want to live that way, let them die that way, according to the evil of their deeds. Give to them according to the work of their hands and render them due reward. God, if that's how they want to live, kill them. You say that's harsh. No, it's reality. God helps his people. Verse 5. Because they do not regard the works of the Lord or the work of his hands, he will tear them down and build them up. How long? No more. You see, not the people in verse 3 are evil in their hearts. They're going to receive judgment because of their evil hearts. Note that the people in verse 3 are evil in their hearts. And notice what else receives judgment. Now, in verse 5, they'll tear down the work of God instead of building it up. Hang with me. I talk to a lot of churches, and here's what they'll say to me. We can't afford to lose anybody. Yeah, there are some folks you can afford to lose. Those who tear down instead of build up. Those who need attention more than they need the ministry. Those who feel that they are the church boss, or they're in control, or they want to be in control, or they got this thing that's theirs and they got to do it. You see, a wrong heart can never bring glory to God. I don't care how much you try. I don't care how good you work. I don't care how much you put excellence in. I don't care what you do. The wrong heart can never bring glory to God. It always tears down. It never builds up. Notice verse 6. There's an assurance that the psalmist will not be dragged off with the wicked. He said, bless the Lord, for he has heard the voice of my pleas for mercy. Then he shifts gears and starts talking in third person. Yahweh has heard. In that intimate moment, he wasn't Yahweh, he was my shepherd. He was the gracious God. He was the one whom I had this intimate relationship with, and he has heard me, but he'll also help me. Notice verse 7. The Lord is my strength and my shield. In him my heart trusts. I am helped. My heart exalts. And with my song I give thanks to him. Amen. We're at Thanksgiving season. But you won't pray this kind of prayer Thanksgiving at your Thanksgiving table on Thursday. No, you'd run from it. Because you know what it means? It means to confess. Let's read it like that. He says, I will confess to him. So, on Thanksgiving Day, when you're sitting around the Thanksgiving table, the Bible, New Testament, says confess your faults. So why don't you go around, instead of going, I'm thankful for my job, I'm thankful for my family, I'm thankful for my car, I'm thankful for my kids, here's my sin I'm battling with this year. How would that go over at Thanksgiving? I mean, that's what he says. It also means praise. But see, I can't praise him until I've confessed it. You know, everybody wants to have a testimony service or a praying service or a praising service. You know what Paul tells us? Have a confessing service. If I announce we're meeting tonight and we're going to confess our faults, some of you come to listen, but you're not planning on speaking, right?
Yes.
Why? Because we want to fake. We want to fraud. We don't really want God to help us. We want to look like we're special and we're sweet and we're kind. No, folks, we got to get down to the nitty gritty. If God's going to help us, we got to confess. Because you see, my strength is a personal word. That means he is our power and might. Oh, Yahweh, you are my power and my might. You're my shield. You're my defender. Because I'm thankful. My heart can trust you. I can get help. My heart can rejoice. And at the end, he said, I got a song I can sing. God helps us. Growing up as a child, we sung, what a friend we have in Jesus. All our griefs, sins to bear. But all we do not carry, everything to God in prayer. So he hears us. He helps us. But verse 9, he closes the psalm with, he holds us. Oh, save your people and bless your heritage. Be their shepherd and carry them forever. Now, the word carry here is where we get the word hold from. It means to lift up, to bear up, or to sustain. Friday night, we land in Kentucky. And Judd had told me on the phone, he's our 3-year-old, that he'd been in North Carolina and he needed beans and rice. That meant he wanted to go to the Mexican restaurant there in his town. Now you have to understand, Judd is the mayor of Paintsville, Kentucky. I mean, I'm amazed how many people knew him in that restaurant, wasn't you? And people come up, high-five him, shake his hand. He talks to everybody. He's a politician. I don't know where he got it from. But anyway, he hung with me all night. We got ready to go to the car, and it was kind of raining. And I was talking to somebody, and I kept feeling somebody pull my britch leg, and I looked down, and he's going, you know what he wanted? He wanted me to hold him. His dad reached for him to go to the car, and he said, no, Pops. Now, yesterday, he decided he's going to quit calling me Pops, he's going to call me Popsy. So I call him Judsy. Well, he doesn't like that. So yesterday, he said, no, Pops, you're Popsy, and I'm Poopsy. I said, okay. So now that's our new names. But I carried him. And I put him in that car. And as I bent over to buckle him in, I felt a little cheek against my cheek. And he went, I love you, Pops. You see, the Lord wants to hold us like that. God is saving his people, the anointed king. David is the king. That's the heritage. Absalom could never be the heritage. Absalom could never have the heritage. Absalom could never be a part of that heritage. Why? Because he was rebellious and he was sinful. He could have been, but he chose not to be. But God is going to shepherd his people with power, with a rock, and with protection. And notice verse 9 has changed again. We've gone from the intimate in verse 1 through 4 to the third person in verse 5 through 8. Now we're back to that intimate Yahweh. Save your people. Save your people. Bless your heritage. The Lord turns from military and shield and strength and refuge at the end to be what? A pastoral shepherd. Psalm 1, Psalm 32, Psalm 119 all begin with the same word, blessed, which literally means to be happy. Heritage is both his people and the land. Understand something. God was holding the king and the people and the land where? In his hands. Isn't it interesting? He holds us. You ever been in a situation where you didn't know where to turn? And you just felt the arms of the Lord holding you. Just embracing you. Not in a physical way, but in a really strong spiritual life. This psalm gives us the picture that the Lord is really there in the most horrible, horrible circumstances of our lives. Again, what are you going to do with this lesson today? Who do you know who needs it? Do you ever answer that question? Have you ever answered that question? Why are we so selfish? We want to come to church and get it, but we don't want to give it. He hears us. He helps us. He holds us. Studying for this psalm took me back 22 years ago. It was January the 12th. January the 11th had been a very busy day. I'd met with law enforcement and attorneys all day long. And it was on Saturday. And Sunday, we were bracing ourselves to be picketed for the first time in my life as a pastor. We had the national media calling. I remember getting up that Sunday morning, going to the church really early. You have to understand, even in this day, at this moment, one of my top priorities as your pastor is not only just to preach to you, but to protect you. I'm always trying to protect you. You may not believe that, but I really am. But I knew that day was a dangerous day for my people. Because not only did we have two groups out there picketing, it was interesting, they were picking each other and both of them picking us. I don't know they'd ever got together, thank God. But anyway, I pulled in the parking lot. Unusual Sunday when you see tractor trailers in your church parking lot with the Kentucky State Police symbol. You know then it's not going to be your average Sunday. And I got out and I met with the lieutenant and we shook hands and he said, "It's going to be a long day, preacher." And I said, "It sure is." And so I gathered the troopers around and deputies that were there, and we prayed for them. And I thanked them for their service to our church and to our community. I walked in the church office. And it's interesting. Church is an unusual thing. Do you know that? You don't know this because you come late. But there's a quiet moment around here when you know there's fixed to be a hustle. And so I like to get here early by myself, just walk through the building, just spend a little time in prayer. But as that day got on, it got more chaotic. The media showed up, lots of national media, and we had to referee them, and they're just jerks. But anyway, we had to wrestle with them. We had to wrestle with attorneys. We had to wrestle a lot of people. And I got to preach. While they're singing, and I can hear where I'm at, I can hear the noise in the outside. So I get nosy and decide I want to go see what's really going on outside. So I head down the back door to go out the basement of the church. And I guess the lieutenant saw me sneak out, and he snuck out behind me. He goes, no, preacher, don't go out there. Please don't go out there. We got everybody calm. If you step out there, it's going to be chaos. And he's a strong believer. And I said, okay, I'm good. And I looked at him and I said, I've preached Psalm 23 all my life. But right now, I got to practice it. He just hit me. And so he and I prayed together downstairs. I made my way back up. I probably didn't have this outline in my head. No, I didn't. But it's amazing in the darkest hours of your life when he hears you and he helps you, but he holds you. I preached that day on the sermon title, You Believe Fred or Do You Believe Paul? Because Fred was the one picking at me about the scriptures. That day, I sensed something I've never forgotten. The real hand of protection, of God hearing, helping, holding. You need that in your life, folks. You need it in every area of your life. So don't let this psalm just pass by and it's another sermon. Go home. Indulge this Thanksgiving season. Thanking Him for hearing, for helping, for holding.